You want to call the select board to order since
Is
you're
Jackie
here?
on?
Jackie is not on.
In that case, I will. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Water and Sewer Public Forum. Today is May 31st, 2023, and I will come back and defer to the chair. I was just about to call us to order. Would you prefer?
Sure, yeah, call the select board to order.
Do we have any members online? Is Karen on?
Karen is on, I believe.
So we need to do a roll call.
Okay.
Is she online? Karen Herrick is not online, sorry.
Not, okay. Don't have to.
Here. Okay, all right. I also posted FinCom, but I just see one member of FinCom in the room, Mr. Coram, and I do not see anyone else on Zoom. That's from FinCom. So this is a public forum. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm hoping that this is a little bit informal. Really just an opportunity to ask questions. On what we have been talking about for some time. I wanted to run through a few slides and then introduce a tool that I kind of breezed through at the last select board meeting. That tool has been posted on our website. I will share where it is on our website at the end of this. And then hopefully open it up for questions to anyone that is interested. So I just wanted to start first with something that I think is important in terms of how our water rates are developed. So this is a chart that I think I presented now a couple of times. So the Water Enterprise Fund and the Sewer Enterprise Fund are separate entities. So the Water Enterprise is a self-contained budget, if you will, and it's got to be self-sustaining, self-balancing. So what we do and I to my knowledge, most cities and towns have an enterprise budget for managing their water and sewer expenses. So we essentially take a total budget, total cost of the water tasks in town, and then we divide that by a projection of water usage, but essentially the amount of water that we project to sell next year, and that's how we determine what our water rate should be. So what this chart shows basically is how the water enterprise is built. So 33% of the expenses related to water are related to the MWRA assessment. This assessment is issued annually. At the end of this presentation, I'll go into some details as to how the MWRA assessment is built for water and then for sewer. And on the water side, debt makes 34%. So when we talk about the buy-in fee, right, for Reading to join MWRA, there were about $11 million that we borrowed, that the town of Reading borrowed, and that is being paid off in debt. So that is separate from the MWRA annual assessment. That debt will be fully paid off in 2027 and 2028. Some of it falling off in 27, some of it falling off in 28. But of course, it's hard to say whether that debt will go down to zero because we continue doing projects such as the Auburn water tank and obviously water main replacements throughout town. So that debt will never go to zero. The other components of the budget are wages, which is essentially our employees that operate the system, as well as some overhead expenses, operational expenses, which is things like tools, consumables, if you will. general fund support, which is essentially a transfer for other components such as the water billing function, the accounting function, and things like that. And then capital, which is a component that is paid cash, just like in the general fund. Every year we fund some capital out of cash. Sorry, and the last thing that I'll say is that this year, for FY24, town meeting voted $850,000 from reserves to offset the budget. And then we have $145,000 that we are going to use from ARPA, the $930,000 that have been already allocated to support the capital components in the budget.
Excuse me, if you don't, before you go on, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Thank you. What are the terms on that debt and when does it expire? In other words, the buy-in, when does it go on, and is it all basically interest-free loans that are sitting there, or we're paying some interest too?
We are paying some interest. So if you're asking about the components of the buy-in,
Yep.
the buy-in, it was a bond, a 10-year bond, and we the bonds mature in 2027 and 2028.
Okay, thank
So
you.
two portions. It is separate and different from the 10-year interest-free loans that we receive every year from the MWRA. In the sewer enterprise, similar component or similar chart, the similar categories, but the MWRA assessments makes up 72% of the budget. Debt makes up 11%, and you see the other components there. So I wanted to pull a slide that I presented last year. So basically in FY22, as we were approaching FY23, and we were talking about this idea, this concept of tiered rates, and I just wanted to kind of talk about what we talked about then. Just to reiterate that this is not something new, it's not something novel, I don't think, and it's not something that we are alone pursuing. Tier rates is something that most cities and towns are moving to, and the example that I pointed out almost a year ago now was Wakefield, that implemented it two years before us. So Wakefield essentially hired a consultant to do a water rate study, which we have done, and from that water study, they recommended the creation of four tiers. So that's just this is an example. Okay. There you go. Thank you for going on mute. So there's four tiers in Wakefield. As you can see, the start and ends of the tiers are a little bit different than what we're proposing, but again, those are things that we have been talking about for some time. The idea is that the lower tiers captures people living alone, senior couples, and other small users. Tier 2 captures the residential user, the average residential user, which is usually a 3-person household. And then in the Reading example, I'm sorry, the Wakefield example, Tier 3 allows commercial accounts and larger residential accounts to conserve water to avoid going into, in the Wakefield example, Tier 4. Yes.
Just want to break in here, Jeffrey Carr on Ridge Road. I'm having trouble a lot of times when I see these things because the units aren't clearly spelled out. You say 65 gallons per day, but then you have a number that's 1,000 watts per what?
Yep.
And later it's 1950 cubic feet, but we know that the water bills come in 100 cubic feet, so that would be like 19.5 in some places. So and is that per quarter, per day, per hour, whatever. So
Sure.
if you could try and
Yeah.
be consistent in your presentations so that I know what you're really talking about. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I will borrow your water bill, if you don't mind it, Mr. Bob.
Yeah.
So Mr. Bob Holmes was gracious enough at the last meeting to share his water bill. So the water bills in the units where it says usage is basically billed at in his example is 9, right? So 9 means 900. So the units of billing is in 100 cubic feet. So in the water bill, and
Yes. Quarterly?
quarterly. Yes, we rating bills quarterly. And it says, there's a small explanation at the bottom. All usage and readings are in 100 cubic feet. 100 cubic feet equals 748 gallons. So absolutely right. The units are confusing. In the tiers, we are talking about in cubic feet. And we are talking about in quarterly because that is the way that we invoice in Reading.
And then that $7 in tier 1, is that per cubic foot? Per
That is-
100 cubic feet? Per-
That is per 100 cubic feet. Per 100 cubic feet. That's right. Per 100 cubic feet. Because that's
Even though
again
you're listing it
the way that we.
where it says 1,000, that's not the same 100 cubic feet, that's actually 1,000 cubic feet.
Sure, it would be from 0 to 1.
100
It would be, yeah, you're right. It would be from
0 to 10, right?
0 to 10.
100 cubic
Right.
feet.
Cube 100
Billed
cubic.
at $7.30 per 100 cubic.
Yeah. That's right.
So
Glad you pointed
it would be helpful.
Sure.
to Add this on the slide rather than.
that. You got it. Yeah, no, absolutely. Tiers are units are complicated when talking about this one in particular. So just a summary again of how we got here. So today we have a single rate system based on water usage because there is no sewer meter. And to my knowledge, there are no communities that have sewer meters. Measuring the sewer that goes out into the pipe at the home level, I'll say. The proposal is to go to a tier system that would encourage conservation. Higher usage will be billed at a higher rate. And town meeting in 2022 funded a water rate study similar to what Wakefield completed. And actually, the Chronicle had an article just a month ago, and so that the same consultant was doing a similar effort in Winchester. We have and reviewed this topic at 3 different select board meetings, and we held a public hearing on May 23rd. The select board recommended a public forum, which is what we are holding today, and the select board will be asked to vote on the new water and sewer rates at their meeting on June 6th, and the new rates go into effect on September 1. And obviously that is billed quarterly. So I shared this slide at the last select board meeting. Luckily, we in FY24 we have good news because last summer was drier than usual. We had a higher usage of water, which essentially results in higher revenue. So our revenue this year for the Water Enterprise Fund in particular, we are over projections at this point by about $300,000 as of this afternoon. So we have hit our projections, and we are a little bit over the projection by about $300,000. What this means is that this year in particular, we will have some regeneration of retained earnings, which has not been the case in the past 2 or 3 years, where we have been draining the water enterprise return earnings. It is very hard though to predict what next summer looks like. It could be dry. It could be very wet. So it is hard to assume that every year is going to be a dry summer and that revenues will look this positive. Also, this year, the MWRA, because in a similar story, the MWRA is also seeing a lot of growth in revenue, if you will. The decreases that are passing on to Reading are less than usual. So at the bottom, I know it's very small, but just as an example, this is the water assessments. So again, the component of the budget that makes about 32%, if I remember correctly, from the first slide. This slide shows the annual increases in the water assessment. And some years is incredibly high, like in 2022, there was an 18% increase in assessments. Obviously not a great story. In 2024, fortunately, we have a water assessment of growth of 0.6%. So you see that the average 12-year is 3.9%. So this year, our water assessment is a good story to tell, but again, the average is 3.9, so we can't take that for granted or budget that way. One question that came up at a select board meeting is are we using the right data for our analysis? So what we did is we took 4 quarters, 1 year's worth of data, and it was July of 21, October of 21, January of 22, and April of 22. So basically four quarters worth of billing, and below is a graphical way of just showing water usage year over year, and what the chart on the left shows in red the calendar year 2020, right? So what we're seeing here is that the summer of 2020 was significantly higher than the summer of 2021. Right, and we assume that was COVID, right? Everybody was home. So the summer of 2020, water usage was high. So we did not want to use 2020. We see that year over year, the winter usage is relatively flat, relatively the same. It is in the summertime that fluctuates, right? If we go to calendar year 22, so it is the chart on the right. In this one, the blue chart, the blue line is calendar year 22, and the red line is calendar year 21. What this shows basically is that in calendar year 22, in the summer months, there was a significant growth, significant higher number of water usage, which again we attribute to a dry summer. So all to say that we feel very confident that using the 4 quarters that we used are representative and conservative. We did not want to go pre-COVID because it would be going back to 2019, and we felt like that data was too dated, especially with development happening. A question was asked about, are we required to go to tiers? I presented this at the select board meeting. I won't read the law, but essentially in 1994, Mass General Law, Chapter 165, Section 2B, basically encourages, I'll say, all municipalities and water district that are part of the MWRA to go into it, and the language is in the last 2 sentences of the slide, which says, the base rate shall be increased at an increasing block rate to fairly reflect the resource demand and consumption of high volume users of water. So essentially, this is Chapter 165, Section 2B. I reached out to the MWRA and I got this from them, and I had a discussion essentially of how many communities are left with single tiers. Not many, and they said anecdotally that a lot of communities are looking to go to tiers. Another question was asked about, should we implement second meters? These are irrigation meters. This would allow water used for irrigation of pools to be metered separately and not billed for sewer usage. I will share that just this past week I learned that some communities do it a little bit differently. What I am used to is basically having 2 meters parallel, if you will, that the water usage for the pool or for irrigation is piped separately. What one community told me this week is that they have gone to deduct meters. So what this means is that the first meter acts as a primary meter, and the second meter acts as a deduct meter. So essentially, it allows communities to invoice for the entire water usage appropriately. And then in the summer months, this deduct meter concept is used in order to subtract some of the sewer usage. Second meters are common in communities. I will say that best practice is to have residents pay for all the installation, all public expenses, permits, install of second meter, and the community that I spoke to this week had a one-time administrative fee. My only recommendation to the select board is that if the select board would like to pursue this option, I would recommend limiting it to 50 residential properties and run that for at least 2 fiscal years to see basically what is the impact on revenue. Obviously, by reducing the billings on sewer, the cost won't go down, so we will have to just spread the cost among less usage, if you will. And my recommendation would be not to allow irrigation meters to commercial properties. But again, that is a policy decision. And another question was asked of how many people in each household fall in what tier. So this is, we do again talk about units. So this is just how we talk about units on a person level, and it's 45 gallons per person per day. And again, 100. But what do we say, Mr. Jeffrey? 100 cubic feet is 748 gallons. Using that information, the 65 gallons per day is the EPA nationwide threshold, if you will, that is used in the industry. 45 gallons per day is a number that we feel good at in Reading. And essentially what you'll see in this table is based on the tiers that we're talking about, how many people will fall into each tier. So just walking through it, at 45 gallons per day, between the usage of 0 and 500, it is from 0 to 1 person. From 500 to 1, that is in cubic feet per quarter, right? Between 500 and 1,000 is between 1 person and 2 people, obviously at the higher ends. And then 1,001 to 2,500 is between 2 people and 5 people. Tier 4 will be 2,500 to 4,000, and that is between 5 and 7 people. And then tier 5 would be 4,000 and up, which is 7 people or more, just based on that figure of 45 gallons per day. So I'm just going to walk you through 3 different proposals that we have presented at the select board meeting. So the first proposal was on March 7th, which was essentially showed in FY23 the single tier rates. That's what you see at the top, and then at the bottom was 5 tiers. Essentially, tier 1 would see a reduction of 11%. Tier 2, which was 500 to 1,000, would see a reduction of 5%. Tier 3 would usage of 1,001. That's again cubic feet per quarter. Right? To 2,500 would see an increase of 3%. Tier 4 would see an increase of 14%, and tier 5 would see an increase of 14%. And on the sewer side, basically not equal numbers, but analogous numbers, similar numbers. This was presented on March 7th. The select board was concerned with such a high increase to tier 4s and tier 5s, and a few members of the select board requested that tier 4 and tier 5 be separated, and that tier 4 receive a lower increase than tier 5, which led us to the proposal of May 9th. So in May 9th, what we did is we did exactly that. We basically spread out the tier 4 and tier 5, where tier 4 is usage between 2,500 and 4,000, and you'll see that results in a 10% increase for tier 4, tier 5 remaining the same. And again, in all these examples, we were shooting for a revenue goal of the same. So revenue goals, revenue projections were the same. I'll say that the select board chair basically wanted to see a proposal that had a crunched in distribution, if you will, between tier 1 and tier 5. So that's what we presented last time, which was May 23rd. So what this shows now is tier 1 usage. The tier 1 rate is the same as the tier 2. So essentially, from 0 to 1,000 cubic feet per quarter, we'll see a reduction in cost of 6%. Tier 3, we'll see an increase of 3%. Tier 4, an increase of 5%, and then Tier 5, an increase of 10%. So again, the goal there was to kind of scrunch in, if you will, the spread between tier 1s and tier 5, and on this slide I did keep the projections of billings that we are shooting for. So with that May 23rd proposal, which is the last proposal that we put forth to the select board, what this shows basically is a projection of quarterly bills. So this quarterly bills usage is in cubic feet. So 500 cubic feet on your water bill, it would show us 5. And then you see the current bill as in what it would be today, and then FY24 with the tiers that were presented on May 23rd, and then in FY24 the last column is if the select board wanted to keep the current system, which is no tiers, and it shows essentially what it would be for each user, water and sewer. And this is just combining, right? Combining because most users probably don't care whether it's water or sewer. They just care what the total bill is at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. And what for the average residential user, you'll see there that the combined bill would be what the current bill would be, and then what the new bill would be for that, again, that average residential user, which is 45 gallons per day. So we're here today to answer questions. I'll stay as long as I need to and ask any questions, please. Before I open up for questions, though, I did want to share a tool that I shared at the select board meeting, Mr. Bob Holmes graciously offered his water bill. I don't know if anybody else brought their water bill. All right. Would you volunteer your water bill too? Sure. Okay, so we got two volunteers. Anybody else? Water bill? Mr. Brown? Water bill? All right. Okay. So again, just walking through the water bill, right? So the I won't say addresses. So Bob Holmes first. In the water bill, one thing to note is the usage history. So it's a little box, right, on the corner, and it shows basically the last 4 quarters. And as Mr. Coram pointed out, this is the unit is in 100 cubic feet. So when it says 8, it means 800. When it says 11, it means 1100. In January of 22, Mr. Holmes' bill was 10, which is 1,000. Right. So what I did here is I put July of 2022, which is the highest bill that Bob saw, and what you see here is you would see totally to the left, you see quarterly usage. In orange, which is the only thing that a resident should change in the spreadsheet, and then that tells you what your current bill would be, what your new bill would be, and then the difference, and then what the bill would be if we kept single tiers. So just walking through folks with it so for the example of Mr. Bob, his quarterly usage was 1,000. He would have broken up in the bill. There would be a water charge, a sewer charge. On the new bill, tiered rates, it would show exactly the same. Water charge, sewer charge, and then the total. And then the difference, obviously, that there's two components to it: a dollar amount and a percentage amount. And then what the new bill would be with keeping single tiers. And with that, oh, I'm sorry, Kim, do you mind? All right, so for Kim, her history, right, if you will, so it is the same bill. So for October of 22, there was a usage of 9. For July of 22, there was a usage of 7. For April 22, there was a usage of 5. And for January 22, there was a usage of 4. And again, this is in 100 cubic feet. So just we're going to use July just like we did for Bob Holmes. The usage was 7. Right. So we will type in 700. Maybe. There you go. And the spreadsheet will populate essentially what the bill was and what the bill would be with tiers or no tiers. This is again at the top of the spreadsheet. We hard coded the rates that we presented on May 22nd. This was not made by an Excel whiz, I can assure you. So I'm sure that other people would be able to make better spreadsheets, but we just wanted to do something simple that folks could use at home. The spreadsheet is on our website, and at the end of the hearing, I will share. Actually, I'll share it now. Sure. Yeah.
Carla Nazaro, Lawrence Road. So this user is in tier 1 and tier 2.
Yep.
And they get their bill will go down 6% in both tier 1 and tier 2. And this tiered rating system is meant to encourage conservation. Can you tell me how conservation is encouraged for this user when they have a discount of 6% in both tier 1 and tier 2?
I think so Bob Holmes and I were having this conversation actually, and I'm sure it's going to be printed on the Chronicle. Obviously within the same tier, there is no incentive, if you will, right? So if Kim were to stay, under 1,000 the entire time, there is no incentive, right? And again, this reduction is a one-time reduction. This doesn't mean that next year Ms. Kim will see a 6% reduction again, right? This is just a one-time reduction because we're doing it won't be a 6% reduction year over year. That makes sense.
No, but it will be a 6% reduction when others will be contending with an increase some. So if tiered rate systems are meant to conserve, how do people in tier 1 and tier 2, how are they encouraged to conserve?
So they are encouraged to conserve by not going to tier 3,
Okay.
by not going to tier 4,
Okay,
by not going to tier 5.
so I'll ask the question again. For tier 1, when you're getting a discount, in tier 2, if you live alone and you're in tier 1, you can take much longer showers now because you can run your water as long as you want because you're probably never going to get into tier 3.
So Bob Holmes, right, in his example,
Perfect. This is a perfect example. So I guess I'm having a hard time with it's conservation for people who may not be able to conserve, right? It's conservation for people who have smaller households. So to me, it's discriminatory, and I can't believe this board's not screaming about it. For me, it's discriminatory for large families without irrigation systems and without pools. okay? So I want to know how smaller people in tier 1 or in tier 2 are going to be encouraged to conserve.
Yes.
Can you go back to the tiers? Can you put the tiers back up on the screen because we're stuck on Zoom?
So as you're doing that, I'm gonna respond to one of the questions. So a couple things. One, I think the current system without any tiers actually discriminates against small users because we're being driven essentially by the maximum amount that we use, that we consume. So small users are actually paying more than their fair share currently, particularly because they're using less of the resource and there's less demand in the system. Number two, as it relates to the incentive to conserve is to be spending less and to continue to spend less. As Fidel mentioned, this is kind of a one-time adjustment, if you will. So next year, there'll be a rate increase in all likelihood. If history is the base of things. So people are gonna get an increase the following year. So this is kind of a one-time adjustment, although it's a new scheme going forward. The third question I think relates to, so what happens as you get into higher tiers? So the more spread out this is, clearly the additional incentives to conserve are there. If you're on the cusp of tier 3 to tier 4, tier 2 to tier 3, tier 4 to tier 5, there are big incentives to stay below. In this current scheme, May 23rd, the tier 1 and 2 are the same. In the one that we looked at previously, tier 1 and 2 actually are different. So they're in that previous version, there still would be an incentive not to get into tier 2 for rates. However, if you're a small household, you're not using much water, essentially what would be happening in all these proposals is you're gonna get in 1 year some kind of a decrease in your rates. And then in future years, rates are gonna go up, but you're kind of, paying a smaller piece of it versus larger users.
Can I take exception to your, it's discriminatory against smaller users because they're paying more of the piece of the pie because the overall usage for the town is higher. I'm going to say that the larger, when you get into the higher tiers, 4 and 5, and you're looking at users who may have irrigation or pools, they're already paying into a system. They're already, in essence, you're double charging them here because they're already paying for sewer systems, which they're not utilizing when they get into those higher tiers. So they're not utilizing that, so they're getting dinged for that. They're paying for something that they didn't use. And now here, you're actually charging them even more for something they don't use. So you've already dinged them, right? So that's not discriminatory towards the smaller users. It's actually discriminatory towards the larger users. And then you're dinging them twice here
So
by increasing their sewer rates to 10%, dinging them twice.
you're bringing in a new topic, which is, related to other metering. Fidel, how many residential users are in tiers 4 and 5? That you get.
I don't have it in front of me, but.
We said 13, 14%,
Something like- Yeah,
if I recall.
14%, yeah.
13-14% of all users?
86% is 1 through 3-ish.
Yep.
The rest is 4 and 5.
Okay, and how many residentials are in tier 5? I'm gonna venture to say 0.
Some probably, some.
Very, very, very small. So the residential users are clustered in tiers 1, 2, and 3 by far. Vast, vast, vast majority.
But there still are people in those tiers who, right? Tier 4, 3 to 5 household members, right?
Tier 4?
Yeah,
That's what you're saying.
Tier-
Tier 4, 3 to,
Tier 3, I think, but let's check that. That's
Tier
tier
3
3.
was,
what's
Is 3 to 5.
Tier 3 is 2 to 5.
Yeah, 2 to 5 is tier 3.
tier 3?
45 gallons is the typical
So
renting usage.
that's a perfect example. If you go to tier 4 at 45 gallons per day, those are presumably people who are conserving, but they have 5 to 7 people in their household. You're dinging them an extra 10% because they have more people.
So you're only
5%
paying,
on this latest proposal, yes.
What was that?
5% on this latest proposal.
but the rates are set up so that you get the lower tiers all the way up till you max out on. you only pay the higher rate on the amount between in tier 4 at 2501 and 4,000, not the entire amount, only that amount 2,500 to 4,000,
That you're gonna have to get to because of the amount of people in your house.
depending on how much you use per household.
Well, even if we're using the 45 gallons per day, not the 65, so you're being conservative, right?
Right.
You're being good dubious for the environment. So when you get to that 45 gallons per day, but you have 5 to 7 people in that household, you're still getting dinged differently from how other people in this town are getting dinged.
Right, so why? Because you're using a larger percentage of the resources than other people are, than other households are. So I think that that's appropriate to your question of how can you think it's okay? I think it's very
okay
appropriate.
to pay for what you use. It's not okay to have to pay more for what you use because of how large your family is.
So your suggestion is that tiers don't make any sense at all?
If it were me and I was on this board, I would ask 100 questions. One of the questions I would ask is if we haven't been in compliance with the law, right? We haven't been in compliance with this new law since
1994.
1994. We're going to get in compliance, which is always a good thing. It doesn't make sense for the consumption piece of it, right? It doesn't make sense because it's not encouraging consumption of every person in this town. And it should, right? If it's gonna be a rule, it has to be for everyone. So that's number one. Number two, if you told me right now, Carla, come up with a tiered rate system, and I knew the rates would have to go up across the board 3.5%, I would have 3 tiers. I would have 3.4% for tier 1, 3.5% for tier 2, and 3.6% for tier 3. Now, when you're in compliance with the law, you're fair, and you know, if you're gonna use resources, you pay for it, nobody has a problem with it. But don't tax people twice for things that they don't use. And don't
Thanks for
discriminate against larger families.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Would resist. Before I came down, I did a little history. In 1923, the consumption was about 38 gallons per household, per person in town. I like the system where it is. I do get discriminated against. Sometimes I only use 1 unit, but because of the billing system, I have to pay for 2. And I don't mind paying for 2, but I get socked twice for sewage and water, so I think that's a little out of line. If you've ever had the pleasure of not having water, you conserve. When I was stationed at Tripoli, Libya, they mixed the water and sewer lines together, and I can tell you, for about 10 days, it was not very pleasant. We learned how to take 3-minute showers. Any longer than that, the nasty old sergeant would give you I don't want to tell you, but you were escorted out of the thing. So even to this day, I only take maybe 3-minute showers. Now, if you're gonna go up in these rates, I can take a 10-minute shower without getting punished, I wouldn't take it.
10 minutes.
So leave the rates alone. Now, let me ask you a question. I've heard that we're not in compliance. What's the penalty for not being in compliance? Are they gonna shut us off and say the hell with us? I don't think so. I don't think the MBTA, MWRA has that big a clout to say, hey, we're gonna shut you off for water. No, no way in hell, excuse me.
Anyone else in the room?
Actually, probably should defer to the chair.
Sorry, yes.
Thanks. Any others in the room? Yes, please, thank you.
I'm Kim Hodderschlager. I live on Mill Street, about a block from the Ipswich River. In 2021, the Ipswich River was ranked as one of the 10 worst or most endangered rivers in the U.S. by the American Rivers Association, and that ranking was by the American Rivers Association. So one of the 10 worst rivers in the U.S. because of water withdrawals primarily from downstream communities, as we know. Reading no longer draws from the Ipswich River. We used to draw the river dry about every other year. 1997, 1999, 2001, we drew the river dry in the Wellfields area. Water conservation, the fact that the Ipswich River, which is the northern half, maybe 2/3 of the town, is in that watershed, And that watershed is in such dire straits, shows that water conservation is just as critical here as it is in other parts of the country. We're in New England. We're in the greater Boston area and we're still draining our rivers dry. Water conservation is something we can be teaching our children, our grandchildren, and by instituting tiered rates, we're not only teaching our kids, and I'm convinced that those big families can learn to use less water just as small families do, just as couples does, just as Mr. Brown did. And we're setting an example for other communities that haven't yet instituted tiered rates or aren't doing summer or year-round watering restrictions, for example. Reading has done the right thing in the past. We should continue to do the right thing and set a good example for our children, for our grandchildren, for other communities. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Jim Strack, Eastway. I came in late. Is the goal with the rates to have it be revenue neutral? So you're not, the revenue coming in is the same, more or less?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't say revenue neutral. Whether we go to tiers or not will be revenue neutral.
So if you're trying to encourage conservation from the large users, sort of by default, you charge them more per unit. The people that use less have to pay less per tier to be revenue neutral, right? So I mean, you're encouraging conservation. I agree that you're not encouraging conservation with the lower tiers, but that's really, they're not the big users. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thanks. I didn't get your name, sorry, but what you just mentioned actually brought up an idea for me by you mentioning that tier 1 and 2, you're not encouraged to conserve, yet we're giving the biggest break to tier 1 and 2, which is how much, like 60% of the people? Because it's 86 for, I have to assume the majority is in tier 2.
The majority of the town is actually in tier 3.
So you're giving a break to people in tier 1 and 2 that aren't going to conserve to begin with, even though that's probably going to account for half. You'll bring it up in a sec. The other thing is the Ipswich River example that you gave. MWRA's own website by 2045 has us within compliance. They were at like 300 MGD or something like that, and MWRA communities will be at 249 by 2045, which is 22 years from now. That's with droughts and everything else in their examples. So I understand that there may be, the Ipswich River might do something that has no bearing on MWRA communities and being over here in Massachusetts compared to Arizona or any of these other places with massive droughts that they're gonna have to deal with that stuff. It's not proportional to what we're gonna have to deal with. I mean, it's nice to say that we're gonna conserve, but even through their own projections, it shows that it is not going to matter for at least another 22 years. And by then, who knows what's gonna happen. I don't know. I'll go over the second meter stuff later, but.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Chris.
save it.
Any comments from Zoom?
Yes, my name is Greg
Oh,
Holt.
sorry, if you could hold Mr. Holtz for a second.
Okay.
We'd like to go in the order that we see hands raised. And Fidel noticed one person, and I think Fidel, if you could then keep track if there are multiple after that. So, John Sullivan, go ahead.
Sorry, and if you could raise your hand also, if you would like to speak, that's helpful.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. John Sullivan, Weston Road. Yes, I have a few thoughts. I think I like the idea of trying to encourage conservation with water. I agree with Ms. Nazzaro's kind of concern that having the first two tiers being the same kind of just lowers the incentive to conserve water. I think I have my druthers. We go back to one of the earlier proposals where there was a difference in the tier 1 and tier 2. I think I'm in a I guess medium-sized family, and our average usage is kind of like right on the cusp of tier 2, tier 3, so like that would certainly provide some incentive for us to use less water. I think it's also kind of important to note that I've been playing with a bunch of spreadsheets looking at this, but the break-even point, kind of depending on what the proposal is, varies between like 34 to 37 units. So even people that are in even households that are in tier 3 are going to see a break on their bill, depending on like how far into tier 3 they get. I think that's something that's kind of being missed in some of these discussions, which is I think important. I think that by typing everything in the current proposal, by could follow along on the Zoom to get everything typed in correctly. I think it's 36, 37 is kind of the break even number of units where your bill would go from decreased compared to the current rates versus increased. So thank you.
And Holtz?
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Holtz?
Thank you. I couldn't quite find a function to raise my hand. My name is Greg Holtz. Thank you for holding this meeting. I'm a trustee at Summit Village Condominium in Reading. We have 132 homes. My question is, what's the procedure for what I would call multi-family housing? In other words, we have 10 buildings. Some of these buildings have 12 units, some have 14 units, and each one of these buildings has 1 meter. And then our homeowners are billed, through their condominium fees. So my question is, how do you go about determining what the water usage should be when you don't necessarily know how many people are living in each unit, how many units are in each building? Does that make sense?
I can answer that. Yeah, no, I think I know what you're asking, Mr. Holtz. If you have a water bill, it should look very similar to all other users. Basically, there's a usage, right? With water bill, water is billed through the meter reading, right? There's no way or function to account for either the number of units or the number of residents. So the only way that we have to invoice for water and sewer is it is through that water meter and through usage.
Well, obviously, when there are 14 homes on 1 meter, we're going to very quickly go beyond tier 1. We're going to be in tier 26 or something. So there must be a mechanism to understand how many homes are on that 1 meter. And I'm sure we're not the only multi-family housing situation in Reading that utilizes that system. In other words, each home is not separately metered. There could be as many as 14 homes on 1 meter. So I guess we need to figure out how to equitably go about billing for multifamily housing.
Yes. So I will add that sub-metering is a big discussion. In my previous position in Chelsea, multi-family housing is very common, and sub-metering was something that we spoke about quite a bit. If you Google Mass General Law, Chapter 186, Section 22, there is a lot of detail. Basically, it's a big discussion in cities, certainly, with regards to the way that sub-metering can happen. It is possible to happen, but it is essentially done after the town meter. And if you want to add, Mr. Holtz, your email on the chat, or you can email me on the website, I'll be more than happy to share that law. It is Mass General Law, Chapter 186, Section 22.
You're telling me that if we don't go to the expense and the trouble of sub-metering each individual home, that we're gonna be billed at the highest tier, is what you're telling me. And if that's true, I would encourage the Reading Select Board to hold on implementing threshold billing, because that is going to be very detrimental to Summit Village condominium and our 132 homeowners, if I understand you correctly. I think that needs another look. That's quite problematic. I respectfully say that.
Question for that.
I do not see any other hands.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Could I follow up with a question for the resident?
Yeah. Mr. Holtz.
Excuse me, my hand has been raised for about 40 minutes.
Sorry about that. I didn't see that.
Go ahead, Ms. Binda.
Thank you, Angela Binda, Orchard Park Drive. I have a couple questions. I'm gonna get them all out there and then you can respond. The first question came in one of the slides early on, and in the whole breakdown, the pie chart that the town manager showed, 10% of our bills go to pay for staff. Are there any other departments? Why aren't we paying? I'm assuming it's the DPW, so why aren't we paying for the DPW? Why isn't that coming out of our taxes? Why is there 10% of our bills going towards staff? Are there other places where we do that, where bills go to staff, or is this unique to water? And
I'll take that one if you don't mind, Ms. Binda. Yeah.
so you can answer as long as it doesn't come out of my time, so.
I will put a link to our budget for FY23. Essentially, in the enterprise section of the budget, right, that town meeting approved, there is a breakdown essentially of that pie chart. There are individuals, employees that specifically do water and sewer tasks, right? We have a water and sewer department. So when there is a water main break, for example, we don't send the employees that work in forestry, for instance, to do a water main break. There are dedicated employees, and obviously this is audited by DOER, by the state. Sorry, I should say the Commonwealth, to make sure that we're appropriately allocating staff that are dedicated for those functions.
Thank you. What percentage of the water that we purchase from MWRA goes into the sewer and that we are charged from? I was kind of surprised that we can't, there's no way to unless you put in a second meter, there's no way for individuals to do it. But what percentage for the town is it that actually makes its way into the sewer that we're charged by MWRA?
So we had a lively discussion about this right before it started. It gets a little nuanced, I'll say. So the MWRA has water meters. I will share the reports that we get monthly from the MWRA. Obviously, it's a bit of an eyesore. But it basically, the MWRA has meters for water, has meters for sewer, so we were trying to do this math right before it started. I will see if we can do this math on the fly. So the average daily flow, and obviously it will fluctuate. Depending on season, it will fluctuate on a lot of different things, which is why average daily flow is used. So in Reading it is 3.2 22, and as you can see in here, it is calendar year 21 to calendar year 23, right? So that is, so they use a 3-year average, daily average, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna now flip to, so that is in terms of sewer. That is the sewer component that the MWRA measures. Now we'll go into the water component, and for this is, the water is measured by the MWRA on a monthly basis, and the units on this is million gallons. So 1 million gallons, this is for the month of April in 2023, Reading used 42.6 million gallons. So, you know, that obviously includes things like, you know, fighting fires. That includes things like hydrant flushings. That includes things that you know, irrigation in everywhere. It is the entire town's consumption. If we assume that in April there were 30 days, is that what it is? Then that would be 1.42 gallons per million gallons per day. Is that right? That can't be right. There were 30 days in April. 1.42 million gallons per day. But again, it's hard to say. You know, it's hard to do apples to apples because of the way that things are measured for water and things are measured for sewer. We were going a little bit on about how the MWRA invoices. So I'll get into that with regards to the sewer assessment, right? So the sewer assessment, I will add this page on the link as well. But this is on the MWRA website. There is some information about how sewer rates are computed. And sewer rates, this pie chart essentially is how the sewer rate is computed for each town, right? So 48.9% of the sewer assessment is based on population, right? So a population a community that is bigger than us, that is bigger than Reading, will get a higher portion, if you will, right? The pie for the population remains the same, but there is just it's a different calculation. That's population. The average wastewater flow, which is what I just showed you, makes up 22.9% of the sewer assessment. TSS, which stands for total suspended solids. I'm sure there's a lot more smarter people than me in this room, but I'll say that it's a measurement of how dirty the water is. Right, so basically, total suspended solids just measures how many things are in the water that have to be removed in the cleaning process. BOD is biological oxygen demand, and it is a little different than how dirty the water is. It essentially it is a measure of how much oxygen is available in the water, meaning that if it were to be dumped in a river or a lake, oxygen wouldn't be available for fish. And then the max wastewater flow component. So in that PDF that I showed a second ago, there's two measurements. One is average daily flows and maximum sewer flows. I will just pop that again in the. This table that is an eyesore. Just shows average daily flows on one column and then maximum monthly flows on the other column, and we can see Reading, right, what those numbers are. So that.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna need to process that. With regards to the second meter, I have a problem with 50 people. You posted that if there is a second meter, that it should be rolled out with 50 households for the first year or two. I really have a problem with this because I really think that if that is the case, then 50 people, 50 households have won a golden lottery. If it is something that the town decides to do, then every household in town should have the opportunity to do it. I think that by doing it 50 households for the next 2 years, is just not fair to the hundreds, several thousands of other households. Those 50 people have won a golden ticket, and Select Board Member Haley said at the last meeting that, well, what can it, what's the cost to it if it's only $2 per person? If other people's bills goes up $2, well then, nobody really cares about $2. But if you have a town full of people who are no longer able to do this program, and we are paying for those lucky 50 people, then I do think that there would be a problem with that. And I think that, when we look at towns that have second meters, where you say, well, you know what, you pay for what you are, you pay for what you're using, then we need to look at Stoneham, and I have my parents' bill in front of me, and they have a second meter, but Stoneham also has a garbage fee. So if you use more, if you put up more garbage, you get charged for that. So while you might have a benefit to a second meter, having a second meter, you want to, it's a talented philosophy that if you use something, you pay for it. And if you're not using sewer, you don't pay for it. But if you are using more garbage, you do pay for it. So I would have a problem with it being rolled out for 50 golden ticket winners. I do share Ms. Nazzaro's concerns, because I don't think that you can just say it's a matter of conservation, not conservation. But I do like the idea that you're only paying, the higher rate kicks in only above a certain amount, so that it is up. If my bills are, I looked for a 12-month period, they were 12, 13, 14, 15. They were higher in the summer. Obviously, I don't have sprinklers, but I'm hand watering my bushes, so it's higher in the summer. But it's only a little higher, and I'm only paying for that. So I do think that that is a good thing. I'm against the second water meters unless you are able to do it for the entire town. And I think that the tiered water system is a good system. I think we should be in compliance. And I think that I'm happy with the adjustments that you made. Thank you.
Marion Downing has her hand up.
Go ahead, Ms.
Hi. Okay, thank you. And I'm speaking for myself not as a member of FinCom. I got into this presentation a little bit late, so I don't know if something was discussed. I tend to agree with Ms. Benda about why just limit it to 50 people. But in looking at some of the data that I've seen, the majority of districts do allow second meters, and it feels like, well, people are subsidizing, some people would argue, well, by allowing a second meter, everyone else is subsidizing to the tune of $1 a year or $2 a year or $5 a year. But right now, it's the reverse. People who don't put water into the sewer are subsidizing everybody else. And like Ms. Benda, I just do hand watering. I don't have a pool or an irrigation system. This is not gonna benefit me hugely, but we do, in my household, I think it's, like we use twice as much water as we're putting into the sewer, I think. But one of the points I wanted to make when I listened to the last select board discussion, they were looking at why Wakefield deciding against second meters, and they weren't deciding for reasons of conservation. I think the memo I saw was they were just concerned about in these inflationary times, you know, we don't necessarily wanna make this recommendation. And they intend to go revisit it in 2024. So I'm not really gonna speak to the tiered rates because I feel like I think people in this town are gonna kind of suddenly be shocked when they get their water bills. I don't know that a lot of people are paying attention to what's going on or know their usage. But I could see how that might encourage conservation, but I don't think the second water meter does anything for conservation. I think, you know, allowing people to do their hand watering, maybe we ought to find out how many people are interested if they have to pay the plumbing charges. But I just, anyway, I just wanted to make the point that the majority of the districts in MWRA seem to allow these irrigation meters at certain times of the year. And I don't know why we would limit a pilot to 50 people. I think it should be for all people, as Ms. Binda said, but I'm also in favor of trying it out. Thank you, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Other board members, Chris?
Thanks, Jackie. Marianne brought up a good point that I never thought of either in my whole second meter argument, is that we're basing it off second meters being used for the entire year when they're not. They're only gonna be used for 1 or 2 quarters at the most, because the other time it's gonna be cold and no one's using pools or irrigation. So that means it tanks the number even lower than we were thinking that it would be, that how much you have to offset the sewer rates with. Because in the other 6 months of the year, people won't be using the sewer for the irrigation and whatnot. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, we've been basing this all off the entire year being done at once, when in actuality, it's only about 6 months worth of numbers. So that means it's gonna be significantly lower than my already lower number to begin with. So my $1.50 might be 75 cents.
So, when the board asked me, how much would it cost if everyone went to double meters, I have no idea, right? I mean, it's hard to project who's gonna take it. It's hard to project how much usage is gonna be reduced, right? It's hard to, it is definitely hard to project. So I did, you know, some spot checking basically of some homes, and in those examples I only reduced sewer for the summer months, the 2 summer bills.
So if you could bring up the email that you sent me last night with mine and Tom Wise's house, so everyone can really see what we're arguing over here financially. I'm fine with it.
You're okay with that? And Tom Wise is okay
I'm
with
good
that?
with it.
Okay. I know Tom Wise has shared that he is okay with it. So I'm actually hesitating to do that.
I can bring it up if you'd like.
I'll pull up yours.
Well, I'm mainly basing it off the email because
Yeah, if you look at the spreadsheet of how that calculation came up, it was for the summer months, the July and October billings.
So for 50 people, based off Tom Wise's pool, irrigation, and about 8 people or so living in his house, for the 50 people to take advantage of a second meter, it would have to raise the bill of everybody by $6 for the entire year, which is, how much again? That's, if it's $6 for the entire year, that's 50 cents. No, that'd be, what are we basing this off? $6.
Quarters. It's
Yeah, so it's a quarter, so it's $1.50 a quarter. So everyone's bill would have to go up $1.50 based off Crazy Tom's irrigation usage. If you use my number, which is a third of Tom's, and I have irrigation with 4 people living in my house, that means instead of the $1.50 a quarter, now you're looking at 60 cents or something a quarter?
So, I mean, if you're okay with showing it on the screen,
I'll show whatever. I already said I'm not taking the second meter even if we did it because I
pull up so again, it's hard to say what the usage reduction would be, right? Because it is hard, it's complicated to project that, but individual counts certainly is easier. So what I did is I took usage for 71 Tennyson Road, which happens to be a random resident, and I basically projected, a 50% reduction in sewer in the billings for July and the billings for October only. So billings for July and billing for October only.
yeah. So
71 Tennyson Road, and what that is so that was a difference of $233 in revenue, if you will, right? So doing simple math, you multiply that by 50, then it's $11,000 a year, $11,600 a year. But and I just said on the screen you'll see I just took 100, 500, 1,000.
So essentially, it's like $60 each user a quarter would get dinged on their bill to allow 50 people like me to have a second water meter, roughly.
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone's going to be me. It'll be probably a little bit higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Not as crazy as
It's a
Tom's
factor
number.
of their usage as well, right? So the higher user people will obviously get, it won't be $6 for them, it'll be $10.
But currently, all the irrigation and pool people have been paying the full amount for the entire time, even though it's not going into the sewer to begin with.
My understanding is that Reading has had a policy of not allowing second meters for a long time.
Yeah, since 2011 or whatever, when we joined the MWRA.
2005.
2005, even further going back. I'm hesitant seeing the tiers going from 1-5 going across. If we were to make it where you hit tier 4, you pay for tier 4 for all the water you used. To me, that would make sense for encouraging conservation, because then no one's going to want to hit tier 4 because they wouldn't go through that entire range to be able to get to that number. Because you're not going to want to get dinged. You'd be like, I'm not going to go up into tier 4, I'm not going to go up into tier 3.
Wouldn't that be even more discriminatory to the tier 4 families?
Oh, no, I agree that it shouldn't be done like that,
Yeah.
but that's the only way to me that it makes sense to actually encourage conservation, because you're gonna try your best never to hit tier 4, tier 5. It's like a video game, you're never gonna wanna go to that number.
Right.
I don't think it should be set like that to begin with, but I'm just saying if we're gonna go with the conservation route, that you're not conserving that whole way, because you're paying reduced rates in tier 1, going into 2, going into 3, you're just paying the lower number going through the moon. It's when you hit tier 4 and 5, it's when you hit the increases, and if you were penalized for doing that, then it makes sense to me. And just one other thing on the Summit Ave condos, or wherever it was mentioned with the 14, if out of the 14 people that were in that, one of the water meters that are attached there, if Bill Brown was one and 13 Carlers were in that building, and Bill's doing his best to conserve like we all want him to, they're still tier 5, and that's not fair to anybody. That's gonna be the end result for them. June 6th is our next meeting where we're voting on it. Unfortunately, I don't think he's aware of that, but that's what's gonna be happening. His example is not fair, doesn't make sense to me either. We can go into it all day on things that aren't fair and don't make sense to me anyway. And then one other
I really
thing.
appreciate that, thank you.
Yes, Greg, I'll always tell it how it is, not how it should be. The other thing, to Angela's point that I somewhat brought up to Fidel at the beginning of this, is that I've been looking into whether or not Reading has a meter coming in from MWRA and a sewer meter also for MWRA. And if we find out that MWRA has been charging for 1,000 gallons of water to come into Reading, and then on their sewer meter, they only get 700 gallons to come out of that. And then Reading, in turn, does 1,000 and 1,000 for everybody. I mean, I'm just gonna say that is just massively discriminatory this entire decade since we've been a part of them. Do you see what I'm saying, Jackie? If we're taking in 1,000 and MWRA is charging us 700 on sewer because that's what's really going to its system, but Reading itself is charging 1,000 and 1,000,
Well, it relates to, I guess, the question I have, if you, Fidel, could go back to the pie charts that show how our rates are made up. It struck me that the MWRA assessment was something like 77% of our sewer costs. Can you, Fidel, explain a little about why? Is it just the nature of how water rates are assessed? I mean, do we it look like one of the smaller communities within MWRA have any leverage or say over this? Because what I'm seeing here is, yeah, the sewer enterprise budget is 72% MWRA, but if you go back one, it looked like the MWRA assessment was a much smaller share for water.
That is just a function of everything else in the pie, right?
So that debt, so do we I'd like to compare what the debt is back to sewer.
Very different,
Yeah,
very different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, so the debt in the water enterprise fund, $11 million of it is the connection fee, if you will, for
Buy-in.
And we say buy-in. It wasn't something that we paid the MWRA. We had to construct piping in order to tie in to the MWRA system, and Reading had to pay for that. So it essentially was a capital project that we had to build. It wasn't like we wrote the MWRA check.
Right, but it's still part of our budget,
We
it's still
are
part of the buy-in is still
appreciating
part of both now, even though we've been there with them almost 20 years.
So that debt was issued in 2015, 2016, so not quite 20 years, and it's gonna expire
Okay,
in
so it wasn't
2026.
an original buy-in, it's sort of like a
Gotcha.
sort of a renewing or,
No, so we had to build a pipe
yep,
that connects to the main pipe,
right.
right, for the MWRA.
Right.
So and it works the same way. So Burlington is going through it right now. They're having a lot of issues with their in-house production of water, if you will, and they are connecting to the MWRA, and they're having to pay for that connection. It's a capital project.
Okay.
So did we join in 05 or 011? That's a big difference.
Yeah.
So we made the decision in 0506, but I'm thinking back to the second connection. I wonder if our assessments from MWRA went up at that time. That would have maybe been above that time frame, I don't remember. Cause that would have been a second, presumably.
So it's phases?
Connection, the
Two
second
phases?
Yeah,
We only had one connection for a very long time.
I will pull up the capital plan.
I'm actually shocked. The vote back then was $15 million. We build our own new water plant and continue to drain the river dry, or invest in $15 million and join MWRA. So I was kind of surprised to hear there's still 11 million outstanding, but.
Yes.
One thing I didn't think most people realize, when that big main was brought in from the MWRA, now you're trying to push water back through your small mains. Because when the original system was set up in 1873, your big pipes were up at the standpipe, your small pipes were out that end. So now you're pushing backwards to fill up that water tower. So that's why it takes, and when they had that schoolhouse condo, they used 1.3 million gallons. If we'd had another fire at that time, we'd have been out of luck.
So this is the capital plan for the Water Enterprise Fund. There, you'll see there's two items, right? The 3.18 and it's called partial join, and then 7.8 million for a full join. The partial join will fall off the books in FY27. The other $7.8 million will fall off the books in 2028, FY28. Was there another question?
No, it's more of, I guess I would just like to come to a conclusion before Tuesday if there is, if MWRA does bill us differently. Because I would like to think that this board would agree that if MWRA has been charging us for 1,000 gallons in and 700 into the sewer instead, and Reading itself has been charging 1,000 and 1,000, we have been slighting irrigation people twice now for a decade, at least, because that doesn't seem fair. If MWRA is billing us our sewer usage only,
But how could they if we only have 1 meter?
that's what I want to find out. Is if MWRA is charging us 2 separate rates for the incoming and outgoing, but then Reading goes ahead and charges a universal rate across the board, that's not fair at all.
Yeah, I mean,
Possibly they charge us uniformly, 1,000 gallons in, 1,000 gallons out, makes sense. But if they are charging us differently, and then we're saddling the customers differently, that is massively disingenuous, this whole time.
I'm gonna pull up our budget. I mean, what I was trying to explain when I was sharing the website of the WRA, it is not purely based on usage, right? I mean, it is based on basically a calculation, a matrix, right?
But that's the rate itself, that's not the gallon that I just said was coming in but not going out. I understand if we delve even deeper into the sewer rate itself, it's showing that irrigation people have been getting triple destroyed by this, because you don't have to clean it, you don't have to worry about all the bad stuff in the water that they have to now clean and all that, because irrigation people aren't doing that. That's like when you delve into the sewer rate, you can actually see that rate goes against irrigation people. I'm asking for, if we get 1,000 gallons in from MWRA, do they charge us 1,000 gallons out into the sewer? Because that is what Reading does. Reading charges the same rate for water and sewer. But if MWRA charges 1,000 in and 500 out, what's up with Reading just going ahead and just doing its own thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that all communities that I know of have a bill for water and sewer off of a water meter, right? I mean, Reading is not unique in that. That pie chart was basically, we take our cost and we divide it by the what we think we're going to sell the next year, how much water is going to be consumed in the next year.
But if every community does it, that still doesn't make it right.
and what I'm seeing, Chris, is a little different, is that pie chart is showing that the MWRA's sewer assessments to all their communities are based on what looks like, half what your population is. So you get, if we're using the term dinged tonight, you get dinged if you're living in if you're living in sort of Boston, yeah, as opposed to a place with a smaller, but I think the question maybe that you're asking is what, for the average and maximum wastewater flow components of the MWRA sewer assessment, how are they measuring that? And are they capturing all 100 gallons in your hypothetical?
Yeah,
That Reading, or that Reading water ratepayers are paying for right now in the absence of a second meter.
Correct. It seems as if the MWRA is doing things fairly and Reading is not, based off if I'm actually correct. Because if MWRA is basing theirs off what Reading has been using, I got to assume that there's, unless they're extrapolating their rates based off the water usage and not doing it off sewer, like there's got to be, they have to have a meter somewhere. Like, why don't we just see 1,000 in, 1,000 out? We're all good. 1,000 in, 500 out, we're not good. Like it's as simple as that. And then breaking into this, like I said, it's sewer irrigation people aren't using half of the stuff that's in there, yet they've been paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, I will call the MWRA and I will ask that question. Based on what I saw, sewer is actually way higher than water, but I'll verify those numbers.
Sewer's way higher.
Sewer, based on doing this on the fly and in a public meeting, it appears that the sewer that is measured by the MWRA is higher than the water that is coming in to Reading from the MWRA. And that could be because, infiltration, that could be, from loose connections of piping, it could be from manholes that are cracked, and it could be from a number of things.
Yeah, so that would make sense.
Sir, yeah.
I'm just listening to the conversation. So the water going to MWRA, you brought up one point where it could be higher. It's infiltration from the sewer lines, groundwater that goes into the sewer line. And then also sump pumps, people with a sump pump discharging. It's illegal, but it may happen. So that you may find that it's what's going out, sewerage is more than what's coming in.
Thank you.
The MWRA should be able to answer.
Yeah.
Yes. I just, I appreciate everyone's comments tonight. The issues for me that we are really facing as a community are the affordability issues, and conservation's important. Our natural resources are important. We have properties in town that were built when water was free, and new construction is not ever built without individual water meters. That actually adds to the value of properties, because people don't wanna pay for other people's water usage. And that does encourage, that in and of itself may also encourage some people to conserve. And of course, everything that's coming out with today's building codes is low flow everything. So that's a good thing for us. But the thing I think we also have to remember is, Bill, thank you for that date of when, water service was established for the residents of Reading, because Reading used to be completely on septic. So there's nothing to say that somebody can't choose to install a septic system today. It's not prohibited. So, but when you live in a community like Reading, you're kind of buying into the fact that we are all gonna be on town sewer and water. And for a lot of people, that also keeps our property values up there, because a lot of people don't understand wells and septic and they don't wanna deal with them. So, I think it's gonna be really hard to say that, a particular household is only using XYZ amount of their potential sewer that they should be able to use. I mean, if we use that kind of logic, then, the families that only had one child and families that had 4 children, that's not fair either, and like families that call RPD a lot, or families that end up calling fire a lot, that's not fair either. So I think at some point that we have to think about, this is the kind of community that we wanted to live in, and it's a shared responsibility. And I know, and we can see by this conversation tonight, this is not we'd love it to be really simple. Like, it would be great if it was really simple, but MWRA is not simple. Every time you show us more information, I realize how complicated it is, and for town staff to manage the maintenance and construction of miles and miles of sewer and water, and make it all self-funding without coming back to town meeting every year and asking for millions of dollars of more sewer. So it's a challenging management task, and I appreciate that. And I think, frankly, I'm not gonna ignore being out of compliance with Mass General Law, but we have this problem in front of us, and affordability, I think, has to be top of mind. And I appreciate the resident who mentioned reminding us that that is one of the things that our neighbor Wakefield is also thinking about. So thank you.
Okay. Adele, will you please ask him, what the penalty is for not complying? I mean, they're gonna kick us out? No.
I asked that question, I mean, and, you know, they smiled back at me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they like our money. So there's no reason to change as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, a lot of good comments. This is, you know, we're gonna face this every year. So I think for this first year, we wanna set ourselves up for success for the following years. And, you know, right now for reserves, it seems to be about, water is about half of sewer, approximately, right? You know, give or take of some percentages. So we have to be mindful of that as well. You know, we have some ARPA money this year and that's it. We don't have it going forward. I'd like to see the May 23rd spread. That was the last chart shown of how we shrank it even from the first meeting. I'm gonna advocate to even shrink that more and use some more sewer reserves to tackle this for this year because it's very healthy. And as far as conservation goes and everything else, and large families, small families, I forget how many communities it was that have a tiered system. I know it's not more than half of the state, but it's a decent number, right, in the greater Boston area? They have tiered rates.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not a, if it wasn't working, I think people would revert back to single tier rates. So I'm guessing it's working. And for me, I wanna be mindful of all the residents, not just the small families and large families. You know, I'm in tier 2, tier 3-ish as a household. And that includes the chocolate truffle on the first floor. They don't have a dishwasher or anything, but they use a decent amount of water. So for me, I'm thinking of the tier 1 and tier 2s and the 4 and 5s. 3s are gonna be the 3s probably for the majority of their household. So, you know, wait till June 6th. I'm not gonna, you know, we're not gonna debate this now, but I don't mind the tiered system. I just want it to be fair as possible, and be aware of both ends of the spectrum.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room or online?
I don't see
My
any
hand
answers.
is raised.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Binda.
Thank you. While we're thinking of tiered systems, I'm looking at my parents who live in Stoneham. I'm looking at their water bill. And I'm just wondering, we have information on how many towns have separate water meters, which is a component of I feel that it's a component of a tiered system. But how many towns actually have different rates for water and sewerage? Because I think that in Reading, we are charged the same. In Stoneham, I'm looking at my parents' bill from February of 2023, and the water rate is $6.95 and the sewer rate is $11.18. Has Reading always had a single rate for both water and sewerage? And has there been any thought to distinguishing between the water and sewer rate?
Ms. Binda, I would say that the Reading has 2 tiers, 2 separate buildings, one for water, one for sewer. In the past, they happened to be about the same, but it wasn't designed that way. And it probably was because of the large debt issuance on MWRA that will hopefully go away in 2027. I hope that at that point, the cost of water will go down and you will see something a little bit similar to Stoneham, not quite as low because Stoneham obviously is going to keep increasing. But Reading does not have a single tier for water and sewer.
Thank you. So I just want to say that this is a really complex, it's so much more complex than I ever thought it was. And I know the select board has spent a lot of time thinking about it and considering a lot of comments from the town. And I just want to thank you, because I know this has been very time consuming. There's been a lot of information, a lot of your charts that I can't understand. So thank you to the select board and to the town manager for, no matter what you decide, for giving it such thoughtful consideration.
Sorry, I pulled up how many communities in the MWRA have single tiers, and there's 5. There's 5 plus Reading.
How many communities are in MWRA?
42, I believe.
So it's like 90%, it's high.
Quincy, Revere, Stoneham, Winthrop.
On to June 6th.
Yes.
Jeffrey Corin, Ridge Road. Just to bring something new into the question, if a big part of what we're looking for is conservation, are there any incentives that we're doing as a town to encourage people to install low-flow showers or get the high-efficiency washers? Is that something that we should do that would encourage everyone to conserve? And I don't know whether that would be funded out of water somehow. That would help to encourage conservation, if that's a big goal.
Yeah, I'll say that DPW is going to be a town day, and we actually, the MWRA, one service they provide is they provide unlimited resources like that, like aerators, low flow shower heads. That it's free. So we have those available downstairs at DPW for anyone, but for free already. But we should, as always, we should do a better job just announcing it, communicating it.
Well, and I think to that point too, I would wonder whether, and I don't know, but whether the green communities that we're inching along toward has either any resources for that or any standards or guidelines.
Sure.
So, yes.
Thanks, Jackie. We do, Jeff, we have rebates for almost everything that you mentioned. So we have rebates for toilets, for washing machine, rain sensors, a couple other items. So to me, mentioning, I did the same thing. I went and got the electric lawnmower because of RMLD rebates. So in theory, you get a low flow toilet. The only downside is you have to have it installed by a plumber, which some people don't do, and then they don't get the rebate, which, you know, that's an argument for a different day. But it's a lot of rebates that incentivize it. And what I brought up last meeting is perhaps we could see about people getting irrigation controllers themselves with the timers and all that stuff. So this way here you can conserve because now it's not watering when it's raining out, et cetera, because you need to have that in order for the rain sensor to work to begin with. The other thing for the biggest thing that I learned in this journey of water investigation is that a majority of the best way to conserve is to actually fix the leaks in the existing systems, because all the water, you know, they'd spend, you know, millions of dollars fixing all these leaks all over the place, and that's where, like, you can really conserve by not having actual leaks. So to see possibly if we could, so I have a flume water meter thing on my own system that measures, you know, how much water I'm using, et cetera, but it also has a leak detector. So there's probably, out of the 27,000 people in Reading, there's gonna be a bunch of them that have leaks that don't even know they exist. And if they had a device like that that's, you know, $100, $200, they'd be able to find out, and then they'd be able to solve, their excessive water usage that they didn't even know they had. So it's just another way to promote conservation is by actually letting people know that you have a leak that you didn't know you had in the first place. You'd know if you had a major one, but there could be 2-3 leaky toilets or something, and then your bill's just getting ballooned. So I think we have to do more on that avenue. If we give rebates for other things, like these 2 small switches that people could just do for $100-200 would be massive in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know who would introduce a new kind of rebate thing for that, the DPW or?
I will speak to Jane and Chris. They're both online, but I will say that in our capital plan in FY25, we have $2 million to install new meters. So it would be meters that are smart and would have capabilities of alerts.
But how many people is that for, and is that for only town-owned?
That is for the entire town.
$2 million for the whole town for water meters? That's it?
I will check that number tomorrow, but that is my understanding.
Well, then that negates one item that I just mentioned, because why would we offer a rebate then when the devices that are gonna do, but still for irrigation, stuff like that. Because sprinklers were going off at Joshua Eaton the other day during the baseball games. Who knows?
All right, well, thank you all. We'll have another public hearing on this next Tuesday at our select board meeting on June 6th. So a motion to adjourn the select board? So moved. No second.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All those in favor? Opposed? We're 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.